Hi, my name is Karl Alvarez from Descendents and a whole bunch of other bands.
I'm David Silver from Season of Risk and the Indie Drummer Collective, and this is Drummers Talk with Bass Player. And I'm here today with arguably the greatest bass player on the planet, definitely in every top 10 list of bass players. He needs no introduction, but I'll introduce him anyway. Karl Alvarez. You probably have seen the Descendents or All. You may have also seen one of his bands going way back to the Bad Yodelers or Endless Monster, All Systems Go, Vexations, The Vultures, which is rad, by the way. I found that online. I hadn't seen your R&B project.
Yeah, we have a whole record. I've just never released it.
Underminer.
Yeah.
And back in 2012, we did a show with you. I think it was President's Wives.
No, that was a weird free jazz collective, and it lasted an absurdly long time, given that we never had any songs. It was all purely improvised behind a local poet. And it had two rules, which was no songs and no fixed membership. So over the years when we'd be jamming out, I mean, we had people like Don Dawkins sit in at one point at one of our nights. But it kept things nice because if I was going out on tour, there'd always be someone willing to fill my chair, you know, because it was sort of a collective of local music weirdos.
Yes. I had a similar project in Boston called Human Shield. We had two rules: no songs and also no shows indoors. We only
that's a good rule.
We played on a stage that was pulled by bicycles, and we would like crash other band shows and bring their audience outside. We know each other because, you know, 1995 we did a pretty long tour with All, Toadies, and Season of Risk. Probably you don't know. 1987 I saw Descendents at TT the Bears in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and it changed my life. It was the All album, which starts off with the rad song that you wrote, Coolidge. You can only be a victim if you admit defeat. I loved that whole PMA that was suddenly like happening in hardcore, and Descendants got like really weird, but also had that like...
Yeah, there's always been a positivity to that band particularly. There's a lot of bands though that kind of, I think that's what separated a lot of the hardcore bands of the time from the previous incarnations of punk rock, which had been quite nihilistic for the most part, you know?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I grew up loving Sex Pistols and Buzzcocks and, you know, listening to Crass and whatever, but suddenly Descendants, it was like, you know, I'm not a loser. It was about being bullied, and I was like, suddenly, hey, this band is like talking about stuff that's happening.
It was very, very real, you know, this is happening in my life too. You know, it was very easy to understand a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
Because that, you know, got to remember, I was one of many Descendants bass players over the years, you know, following behind Doug Carrion immediately, who was excellent. Later went on, of course, to play with Dag Nasty.
Yes.
And then Tony Lombardo, who is his own school of bass, just in general. If you've ever listened to the Tony solo album, you know, he's his own thing.
Yeah.
And so I kind of inherited a lot of the mantle from those predecessors, because I mean, I was a fan of the band long before I was in the band, you know?
Right. Yeah.
One of those
but it's cool because you guys are all like actual friends, unlike a lot of bands who kind of get a gig together and whatever, you know. You and Stefan grew up in high school together. Milo and Bill are in high school together. It's like that tightness comes through on stage too, and also being the tightest band in the world, you guys have an insane work ethic, rehearse constantly, and actually work at your craft. And
well, you know, you rehearse so that you can cut loose live. I mean, that's really it. Once you get the set down to a certain level of muscle memory and comfort, then the stage show goes from there. You know, I mean, that's the thing. It's you practice a lot, and it is a discipline, so you can have freedom on stage. It's sort of our philosophy of it.
I know, and you guys have gotten to the point where you're basically psychic on stage. You don't even like do the normal stage cues. It's just like, start the song. I'm so psyched that it seems like ever since Filmage, it's really like people have recognized this.
Well, it wasn't like the mainstream was all that interested in what we were doing when we were doing it. We had the misfortune of kind of starting our thing in a period where the music scene we operated in was still very, very, very underground.
Yeah.
You know, and very small, which was kind of great because, like you said, you got to meet the people that you were influenced by musically, personally, and you got to know them on that level. I mean, you know, for example, Bill, I had seen him because Descendents had never come out to Salt Lake. By the time I actually met the man, I'd seen him play in Black Flag multiple times because they'd come through so often and we knew them as people. You know, it's like, oh, okay, so now the guy from Descendents is taking over from, you know, one of the prior drummers, whether it be Robo or who was the one they had out here, Emil. They had Emil out here on the Damage Tour. Brutal drummer.
Those shows in the 80s, of course there were huge shows, but there were also a lot of like record store in-stores and like shows with 30 people, and it was not popular music. Punk rock and hardcore were not a popular thing at all. It was like you maybe got lucky enough to get a mixtape or hang out at a record store and meet a group of people who like the same stuff. You know?
Just remember the big record store chains. You know, they never carried our music. They, you know, that was until a very late period. Green Day and Nirvana broke that window, and suddenly, you know, the main retailers would carry freaky music. Yeah. But up until that point, it was kind of very, you had to do a little bit of work.
Yeah.
Just to even get into the music. You had to actually go down to the record store, comb through the stacks. Salt Lake kids were really lucky because there was a bookstore, record store, head shop called the Cosmic Aeroplane. And the guy who was securing records for them at the time, who later became a very famous local DJ on the community radio, Brad Collins, ran the record store. And so he, more than anyone else, kind of determined where the punk rock and fringe music was going to happen in our city, because he would bring in all these wild records.
You had to suddenly like learn a bunch of songs and play a show opening for Dead Kennedys, but were you already a bass player? How did you start playing bass?
You know, I kind of had it on my mind from a pretty early point. Like, I liked the sound of it, and I can remember as a kid very vividly listening to, on my grandmother's kitchen table radio, two songs that made an impact on me as far as what the bass was doing got me. And one of them, oddly enough, is Help Me Rhonda by the Beach Boys. That's one. And the other one is I Can't Help Myself.
But you played them on like 45 instead of 33?
Well, just that was not even on a stereo, that was on the radio. And I remember sitting there at my grandma's breakfast table, you know, and these songs came on, and something about those songs was very compelling to me. And I Can't Help Myself, that bass part's still a template for how you're supposed to write a real cool bass part, you know. Yeah. And so, yeah, that got me interested. I didn't know electric bass really existed. I mean, kind of out of the loop kid that I was. And at one point I tried to play upright bass, but I was about 10, and I had to stand on a stool to do it, which is humiliating. And then on top of that, you know, to take it home on weekends to practice sufficiently to become good at it was very difficult. My siblings got really tired of helping me carry it home after about 1 week of it. And then my parents just decided, you know, it's kind of a little bit of an expenditure to rent an upright bass because we couldn't afford to buy one. So it just kind of fell by the wayside. I didn't really pay much attention beyond that, but I was still a music fan. You know, and when I was 12, I met Stephen, and music had already consumed his existence. And, you know, he kind of, over the years through high school hanging out, he'd start a band, and I'd always be sort of the odd man out. I couldn't do much. I, you know, would carry gear, do what I could to be a part of what was going on, because it was pretty cool. And then at one point I started drawing flyers, and then, you know, still later, I joined the band I was drawing flyers for, which was, of course, Stephen's band. But that was, yeah, I always had that in the back of my mind that, you know, I wanted to do bass. And a lot of the musics I liked had very prominent bass.
Were you already writing lyrics too?
I was always writing what you could call bad poetry.
Yeah.
You know, so the shift to lyrics wasn't that hard. You know, when I finally made the cross. The song Coolidge was, I think, like the third song I ever wrote that I'd call a song. But I had already, like, typically with the Bad Yodelers, who we mentioned before, they would come in with, because they were kind of a Mormon speed metal band, basically, is the best way to describe what they were doing.
Wow.
And they'd come in with these 5-minute, 7-minute long songs and say, here, create a lyric. So try to create lyrics to cover this, you know, elaborate, you know, speed metal masterpiece taught me a lot about brevity. You know, like, okay, now I'm kind of going to get addicted to getting across in 2 minutes, 3 minutes.
Yeah. What's your favorite thing about a drummer you played with?
Oh God, you know, for me, really, I like people who have a very creative but a very on-beat kick drum. I follow the kick drum, and I try to position myself on any given stage in such a way where I can see what the foot is doing.
Oh wow. Because
it doesn't lie. I mean, you see the kick go down, you know what's going to come, and light moves quicker than sound. So it's, you know, kind of smart to do that. And yeah, I really like riding with the kick drum where the drummer really knows what they're doing. It's one of my favorite things. You kind of hook in with the drum part as a bass player, ideally, and, you know, one way or the other, and that's where the groove comes from. You just watch and listen and see what they're doing, and then kind of hear what sounds are coming from where. And it definitely can color what you're going to add to it or subtract from it.
That really happened a lot in the hardcore scene. The bass and kick drum locking in, like, to create that pony beat. And then at a certain point, some bands like you guys and Bad Brains and No Means No started writing different beats and changing what hardcore was until it was like proto post-hardcore.
That evolution's interesting to me because what I noticed is, okay, at least in the early phases of what I'm going to call, you know, the American hardcore scene or punk rock scene, whatever it is, the drummers by necessity came from other disciplines of music. Yeah. They were straight rock drummers. They were hard rock drummers. Some of them were, you know, they had their various thing that they brought into play. And I think that's where a lot of the originality of that early phase of bands, where that comes from, is they were coming from like Spit Sticks from Fear was coming from a real hard blues, hard rock kind of, you know, way of looking at the way the beats work. And his breakdown of how you do it is different than, say, DJ Bonebreak from X, who was coming from a parade band perspective of all things. He was a marching band guy. And and played marimba as well, so he was very musical. But his attitude of fusing in all the cool rockabilly stuff, that's totally his thing. He brought in Lucky Lair from the Circle Jerks, was a jazz drummer, and boy, can you tell, you know, he's all over the place on it. And it's kind of funny because I think Bill's one of the first generation of guys that didn't have an extensive background in other musics before he started playing with Descendents, because that was his first band, you know.
He's obviously an anomaly in a lot of different ways regarding...
Well, he played in church, I guess, at one point or another. So that's about it, you know.
The whole poppy, fun, surf vibe of some of the early stuff, though, was... And just the precision and speed of it was so shocking, and like it either made you quit or go home and practice a lot because it's just absurd. I was gonna say, in any genre of music though, whatever Spit Sticks was doing on We Destroy the Family does not fit anywhere. It's just
no, that's its own. Or Camarillo. Those drum parts are just like Martian. He invented a whole vocabulary on that record, you know.
Completely, yeah. And you know, Earl, who we've definitely stayed up till 4 a.m. talking about Earl.
Oh my Lord! Speaking about that kick drum quality, it's like, you know, his kick drum is like a human heart, man. It's like it's glorious what he and Daryl are able to achieve with that, you know.
Yeah, Earl. That's Earl Hudson from Bad Brains, and he was a jazz guy before. And the reggae thing just sort of started coming out. Those shows, seeing Bad Brains blistering fast and precise, and then and plus just the live show, the energy on stage, and then turning into a weird dubbed out reggae moment it was nice. So great that hardcore could be anything.
And the other idea that I get with that is, you know, those pits could get kind of heated, people get kind of mad, get a bit violent, a little out of control more than is desirable. Chill it out for a minute.
Yeah.
Let them chill out. Cool it off.
Then without doing the Keith Morris method of being like, dude, you guys, we're not going to play anymore if you guys don't stop.
You know,
he would pull that in almost every show.
Crowd control is its own thing, and a lot of bands have it down better than my guys, because our instinct, whenever this sort of crazy stuff would happen, would be just kind of hunker down and play the songs and finish it out until the police literally have their hands on Bill's cymbals. You know, then we're just going to keep going.
Yeah, that's a good show.
Yeah, well, that was quite a show, actually. The one we did that way. Whew.
So, most influential bass player.
Oh wow! See, that's such a tall order because there's so many of them going through all kinds of different genres. In terms of our scene, I will simply say Mike Watt.
Yeah.
And it's less. It's okay. It's about what he's playing, obviously, but the freedom that he is exhibiting within the framework of these, in the case of the Minutemen, songs that are a minute and less. It's very inspiring, you know, and that stuff's pushed right to the front of the mix. It's naked, you know. It's very. He made a big impact on me.
Absolutely, Chuck Dukowski.
Oh well, obviously, yeah. I mean, we all. I'm a finger player largely because of Dukowski. You know, I mean, I watched him do his thing, and like many other people back then, I was just kind of trying to, you know, figure out what it was he was doing. Then I realized what he was doing is something you can't imitate, which is bringing that sheer beast of an attitude to the table. You know, I can hit the strings as hard as I want, and I still wasn't going to get close to that level of thing. It's him. It's a personality.
Yeah, it is. They definitely set the bar for stage presence way early. Chris Kirkwood from Knee Puppets.
Okay, I mentioned him. I did an interview yesterday with Mike from MXPX, and I brought up Chris as an underrated bass guy.
Yeah.
Because album to album, I mean, he is, well, as close to perfect as it can get. When he does the nice country shuffle crooners, he keeps it tucked in. When he steps out beautifully. And there's that whole Up on the Sun record, which is just crazy for, if you're a pick player, that is a template pick player record.
Yeah.
Because he had switched to a pick. He went from fingers to a pick between the two records.
Paul Raven, dude from Killing Joke.
Oh yeah, he was to a degree, but like, I guess they didn't capture my imagination as much as like Gang of Four did.
Oh yeah.
For the bass drum stuff, like that's a rhythm section that really is so specific. It's jarring. You know, when you put their record on, it literally, it's alien music. It never happened before that. The minimalism, the harshness of the groove. Another one is Jean-Jacques Beauvoir from the Stranglers.
Yes.
Who his gnarly tone.
Yeah.
And the way he worked with that drummer, it was just it felt sleazy. You didn't have to hear a word out of the singer's mouth, and the Stranglers just felt sleazy and dirty.
Somehow they played on SNL once.
Yeah, and you're not. I mean, they're one of those records that your parents would object to without even knowing what they're about. Just the sound of it sounds nasty.
Yeah, that bass tone. The first time I heard it, I was like, bass can be like that. David J from Bauhaus too would do.
Oh yeah, man. You know, TSOL opened for them on a tour. The Massacre Guys, Stephen and my first band, were on with them. We were not on the bill, but like a little good opening band we were permitted to attend the gig. And I mean, those guys were so precise, and the theatricality of the presentation was so perfect and precise. It was kind of like a real wake-up call. Wait, this is a real music thing, you know? Because we were used to, you know, the shows at the Indian Center, the shows at the various rowdy punk clubs of the day. Then we're in this very controlled environment of like Bauhaus is putting on a show.
The lights and everything is down.
Yeah, it was deep, man. It made an impression.
Yeah, it does.
I passed up an opportunity to steal his bass from the back of the venue, but because the door was open, the bass was there, but I'm not a thief by nature.
Yeah, that's good.
You know, and he's a good bass player. He deserved his fretless bass. And I wouldn't have known what to do with a fretless bass anyway at that point, so screw it.
Yeah. Or a headless.
Headless I might have been able to figure out, you know.
We're all Devo. Is the drummer bass connection important to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I find that the personal relationship is reflected in how it sounds. So you have to have that there. And I've been very lucky in my life because I've had a number of great drummers that I've gotten to work with that actually, you know, were very, very, very good people on top of it. And it's like, well, and very patient, thank God, in the early stages of when I was playing. John Schumann, who was drummed half the songs in the Massacre Guys, was an incredibly skilled drummer. And just being able to play with a guy like that and have him, you know, point me in the right direction as far as what I needed to be doing, huge influence. Stefan, who's always been a great drummer,
Yeah.
Also, because he and I would just lock ourselves in the basement of whatever crappy rented house we were in and just pile drive and just jam and not play any music to try to find out how drums and bass work together.
Yeah.
And
that's one thing that's really weird about you guys is the multi-instrumentalist thing. That definitely shapes your ability to write and think about music.
Oh, man.
Like Bill.
But then you move on to Bill.
On guitar. And Stephen's a great drummer. You're an amazing singer.
But when I moved out or came out to try out for Descendents, that was a kind of weird one because I'd seen him play a lot, didn't know the guy well, and got to the practice room, and I guess it was weird. It was sort of like an instant thing. We started playing together, and it was like, wait, this is gonna work. This sounds good. I think we could both kind of tell. Yeah, this is gelling very, very well. And of course it helps to have been shaped by listening to the 7 Black Flag albums and the then 2 Descendents albums. So I knew what Bill's drumming style was, but all the same, I like to feel like there was some kind of fairly deep spiritual, for lack of a better word, connection where it was like, wow, when the teeth of a gear kind of mesh. Yeah. It's kind of that vibe,
Yeah, you definitely emanate that on stage, always have. I mean, you obviously got up to speed quick because, Live Edge is insanely sick. And the All record, I mean, you just suddenly came out of nowhere with this kind of insane record.
Yeah, very, very strange. And it bears the mark of kind of where Stephen's music and maybe my music to a lesser degree, because I didn't write for the Massacre Guys, where his music was headed anyway with, it was so songs like Schizophrenia, that's a very, very Massacre Guy-y kind of thing. A lot of it, okay, Bill, Stephen, and I all had a thing where we shared an affection for some of the more unlistenable, jazz rock fusion and prog rock stuff. So you get all these funny time signatures and you get all these funny guitar tonalities that start peeping into, the purity of the punk rock bar chord. You get all this other stuff creeping in around the corners because we like that stuff at least as much as we like the hardcore stuff. We didn't see the fact that we liked one as being at odds with liking the other. We kind of felt it was all one thing. Oh, no.
Yeah. When's the closest you've become the most allular?
Oh gosh, I mean, depends on what you're going for, in a weird way, some of the newer Descendant stuff I think is fascinating to me because it's got these qualities where there's all kinds of crazy musicality going on in them, but we're not beating anyone over the head with it, if you know what I mean. It's all kind of subtle, like a Steely Dan record or something, where it's like, on one level it's this shitty facile pop song, but on another level there's all this crazy stuff going on. And I would never compare us to Steely Dan because, who else can be Steely Dan?
Yeah.
But I wish Devo would cover their songs, but that's just me. So we're more smooth with it. But for sheer raging experimental weirdness, I mean, on the Descendents All album, there's the song Uranus, which kind of opened the door for a whole bunch of other stuff down the line to by the time you get to Always Saves, where a fair bit of that record is very crazy, just outside stuff. It's not punk rock, it's not new wave, it's not jazz, it's kind of its own thing.
Not writing songs for the radio.
Well, yeah, I mean, but no one was going to play us on the radio anyway back then. So it's ask the Butthole Surfers if they ever thought about that for 2 seconds.
Yeah.
That was even going to be a thing. We called our band Butthole Surfers. Somehow I can't hear the DJ at the local rock station really pushing in on that one.
There was a couple of years where you would hear the BH Surfers on the radio. Pincus.
Yeah.
Jeff Pincus is another great bass player.
Well, yeah. I mean, I saw Pincus play with the Melvins, and I thought at that point that, man, I have seen peak Melvins. Now I've seen peak Melvins. Then they showed up with Jeff McDonald the next time, and I'm like, okay, well, now we're on to other peak Melvins. Then they did a tour with both of them. So it's like, okay. Speaking of great drummers, Dale from the Melvins has always had a soft spot in my heart. I'd love the opportunity to play with him one of these days, but he seems very busy.
That's a good segue because the next question here is your dream drummer to play with.
Yeah, he's one. We mentioned Earl Hudson already. You and I have never jammed before.
No, that's good.
I like how you handle the kick stuff. The Season to Risk stuff, was very much in the air that we breathed as a band in that era. You're one of Chad's favorite bands, and so there's a lot of affection for it. George Hurley would be a lot of fun to play with because he's very inventive and creative. There's a guy named Josh Carruthers who has a band called Chilton and had a band called iFarm, and he's one of the more like off-kilter drummers, but man, it's frantic, it's creative, it's worth checking out. He's a fascinating person.
I'm gonna put it out in the universe right now. We need a record with you and Dale.
Oh, that'd be a blast.
That sounds important.
Yeah, well.
And then, what are you currently working on?
Currently, the Descendents new record, which we have a lot of songs in the can already but Bill and I have been very slow to uncork our songs. So within the next week or so, I'm going to start tracking my songs for the album. And we'll see what comes of that. I've also got an Endless Monster record that's been on the back burner. And back to the drumming thing, it's been back burnered because our drummer passed away. Oh. And Robbie Linder was his name, and he was one of the better drummers I've ever worked with. I mean, and he was very much a Keith Moon guy, where like he wouldn't play the same part the same way once, but it all somehow managed to congeal into something very, I can't say enough about this guy as a drummer. He was one of those rare talents,
Yeah.
And and he unexpectedly died, and it kind of, I think most of us in Endless Monster were just so broken by it that we couldn't imagine carrying on with another drummer initially, and then just the grieving process of like, great, we have a record, but it's going to be very hard to listen to it. I'm going to begin work on that record too, which is in the can. We just got to mix it and diddle around with it a bit, just to finally expose people to this group that I've been talking about that consumed my life for a very, very long time. And at some point, who knows, maybe me and John and Dave, the other members in the band, will want to do a thing, and an Endless Monster thing again. Like I said, it can be crushing when you lose the guy.
Oh yeah,
he brought the spirit to the band,
I've been through that a couple of times, and it kind of like, you kind of want to end the band.
Yeah, man, I get why Led Zeppelin did that.
Right.
Like, where are you going to find a Bonzo?
Yeah, don't. Please.
Yeah. Yeah, don't even try. The Who took a unique approach. They just grabbed a drummer who sounded nothing like Keith.
Yeah.
They're like, yeah, he was in the mod scene too. We'll just throw him in there.
We're just going to write a different kind of song now.
Yeah, because there's no way we can do that.
No. People want you to sing more, for sure. Every time I ever see a video online, people are like, oh my God, Karl's voice is rad. When you guys swap up instruments and all of a sudden you're singing like a...
Oh, Black Flag and all that stuff.
Yeah,
all the oldies. Yeah, that's fun. But, I sang for bands before I played bass. I just, over the years, it's easier to get gigs as a bass player than a singer. I love bass, don't get me wrong, but I always was able to do it. The singing thing, look, man, when you got people like Scott Reynolds, Milo Ackerman, Dave Stone, I'm surrounded by all these people who really know their deal. And so I'm kind of, okay, I'm happy to be on the background vocal. I'm at the Vultures band you mentioned, which we changed the name to the Vexations because so many various Vulture bands were emerging at the time. I made an entire record of original material at one point, and I've never released it because honestly, when I was passing the demos around back in, I think like maybe 2004 or 5, no one was real interested. So I just kind of was like, all right, cool.
I think that song Honey is a hit.
Yeah, I think there's a few good ones on that. There's a few other things, but I like to go back in and do some surgical stuff on it because at the time I was trying to play keyboards as well. And I'm not trained at all in that. And I basically was teaching myself how to do it in the basement of my basement apartment with the headphones on, trying to learn how piano works. And so a lot of that stuff is really weird, one-handed piano keyboard stuff. And I'd like to, honestly, Professional Pride says, I'd like to go in and try again now that I know how to play better. Because at that point, I was just trying to like, okay, C, D, figure out the chords, figure out where they're sitting. now I might actually be able to bring something.
I love that about you guys, the professional pride, the work ethic. You were always like, yeah, you could double stroke this, but we're going to do it all downstrokes. And that's the correct way it's done.
Well, it's a different texture. I mean, I can't deny the value of an upstroke. It's good and all. But I mean, for that real frenetic vibe, the downstroke, also, you know, being able to grind on the low strings on a guitar or on the bass. They used to call it Chinese water torture bass when I joined the band, because it's just like, ding, 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 ding. It's really precise. And that kind of is part of it too, just the really precise 8th notes or 16th notes.
Yeah.
Just, yeah, in just very linear, you know.
So great. So I gotta let you go. We gotta keep this to the right length, but thank you so much. Really appreciate it. I can't wait to see you guys play again and hang out. And hope that this new Descendents record is coming out 2021, 22?
Yeah, that's the idea. We're going to try to get it out and get on the road again, assuming this whole pandemic fog lifts.
Yeah.
You know, I'm about a week into my second jab, so we're almost all vaccinated, all of our band. So at least there's that. We can go out and play.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I'll see you then.
All right. See ya.
Bye.